They had prepared the perfect woman for Vincent Moretti, but no one noticed where his eyes went when Emily Carter entered the room. The private ballroom at the Blackstone Hotel glowed beneath crystal chandeliers, every table arranged with white roses, polished silver, and glasses of champagne no one had touched yet. 2 chairs stood beneath the Moretti Holdings crest at the center of the stage. One was reserved for Vincent. The other was meant for Natalie Prescott. Everyone in the room understood what those chairs represented. By the end of the evening, Vincent Moretti was expected to announce the alliance that would unite 2 powerful families and secure a business agreement worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Natalie stood near the stage in an elegant ivory gown, surrounded by board members, donors, and photographers who already treated her like the future Mrs. Moretti. Emily remained near the side curtain with a leather folder pressed against her chest. Inside it was the speech Vincent was supposed to deliver. Beside the speech rested a small velvet box containing the ring Natalie believed she would receive. Emily had selected the jeweler, confirmed the security arrangements, reviewed the press schedule, and corrected the final language of the announcement. She had prepared every detail of a future that did not include her. No one found that strange. To them, Emily was Vincent's secretary, the woman who managed his calendar, remembered every name, and solved problems before powerful men realized they existed. She belonged beside the stage, not on it. Charles Whitman approached her and adjusted his cuff links while scanning the room. "Everything ready?" "Yes," Emily said. Her voice remained professional. "The press statement will be released after Mr. Moretti speaks." Charles glanced toward Natalie. "Tonight changes everything." Emily looked down at the folder. "It usually does." Across the ballroom, Margaret Moretti stood beside Natalie, offering quiet instructions about where to stand and when to smile. The older woman had spent weeks reminding Vincent that leadership required sacrifice. A marriage to Natalie would protect the company, strengthen the family, and reassure every investor in the room. No one had asked whether it would make him happy. The orchestra softened as Vincent entered through the private doors. Conversation stopped almost immediately. He wore a black tailored suit, crisp white shirt, and dark tie, his expression controlled enough to reveal nothing. Daniel Brooks followed several steps behind him, but Vincent's attention had already moved past the board members waiting to greet him. His gaze crossed the ballroom, past Natalie beneath the warm stage lights, and stopped on Emily near the curtain. She lowered her eyes first. Vincent noticed. He always did. The host welcomed the guests and spoke about legacy, loyalty, and the next chapter of Moretti Holdings. Natalie moved closer to the stage. Charles smiled. Margaret lifted her chin with quiet approval. Emily opened the leather folder and prepared to hand Vincent the speech. When he reached her, their fingers nearly touched against the edge of the paper. "You wrote this?" he asked. "I revised the board's version. Do you agree with it?" Emily looked at him, surprised by the question. "My opinion is not part of tonight's program." Something shifted in his eyes. Before he could answer, the host called his name. Vincent took the folder and walked onto the stage. Applause filled the ballroom. He stood between the 2 prepared chairs while Natalie waited several feet away. The host raised the microphone and smiled toward the cameras. "Mr. Moretti, everyone here wants to know who will stand beside you as you enter this next chapter." Vincent looked at Natalie. Then he looked toward the curtain. Emily was already stepping backward into the shadows. He closed the speech without reading a word. 2 weeks earlier, Emily Carter had begun the day before sunrise, standing alone in the executive office while Chicago was still gray beneath the glass. Vincent Moretti's schedule contained 3 board meetings, a private dinner with investors, a legal review, and a press call that had already become a crisis before most employees arrived. Emily moved through it all with the calm precision of someone who understood that powerful institutions often depended on details no one respected until they failed. She rearranged the investor meeting after a flight delay, corrected an error in a contract that would have given the Prescott family unnecessary control over a future expansion, and stopped a misleading press statement before it reached the media. By 9 o'clock, the entire floor was moving smoothly again. No one thanked her. Charles Whitman accepted praise for protecting the deal. A senior attorney took credit for the corrected clause. Emily returned to her desk and opened the next file. She had learned years ago that recognition was unreliable, but responsibility remained whether anyone noticed it or not. Near noon, raised voices came from the conference room. Sophie Miller, a young assistant who had joined the company 3 months earlier, stood near the doorway holding a folder with both hands. Charles was blaming her for sending an outdated financial summary to the board. Emily knew the mistake had come from his office. She had seen the revised document sitting and signed on his desk the night before. Sophie's face had gone pale, and every person in the room seemed willing to let the youngest employee carry the failure. Emily stepped inside. "The original file came from executive review," she said. Charles turned toward her. "This does not concern you. It concerns the record." She placed the email chain on the table, showing that Sophie had sent exactly what she had been given. Charles stared at the page, then dismissed the room without apologizing. Sophie followed Emily into the hallway. "You did not have to do that," she whispered. "Yes," Emily replied. "I did." Vincent had been standing near the far windows, silent enough that neither woman had noticed him. He watched Sophie leave, then looked at Emily. You knew challenging Charles would create tension. Emily gathered the papers against her chest. Letting him blame her would have created something worse. For whom? For the kind of company people believe this is. Vincent said nothing. He had spent most of his life surrounded by loyalty that depended on fear, money, or access. Emily's loyalty was different. She defended what was right even when it offered her nothing. That evening, long after the office emptied, Vincent found her reviewing the Prescott agreement again. A paper cup of coffee sat untouched beside her keyboard. "You corrected the control clause," he said. Emily looked up. "It was too broad." Charles said legal caught it. "Then legal deserves the credit." Vincent leaned against the edge of her desk. "You have never been interested in taking credit. Credit does not protect the company. Neither does letting people believe you are invisible." Emily closed the document. "Being underestimated is sometimes useful." Vincent studied her face, the quiet intelligence in her eyes, and the distance she always kept between herself and his world. "And when does it stop being useful?" he asked. Emily held his gaze for a moment longer than usual. "When the people closest to power forget that invisible people can still leave." Then she gathered her files and walked away, leaving Vincent alone with a sentence he would not understand until it was nearly too late. Charles Whitman understood the value of a marriage that looked romantic from a distance and strategic from every other angle. 3 days after Emily corrected the Prescott agreement, he gathered Vincent, Margaret Moretti, and Natalie Prescott inside the executive conference room overlooking downtown Chicago. The city stretched beneath them in steel and glass, but the conversation was not about love. It was about market access, investor confidence, family influence, and a partnership that would place Moretti Holdings beyond the reach of several rivals. Natalie sat with perfect posture in a cream-colored suit, listening as though her future had already been approved. Margaret stood near the windows, one hand resting on the back of a chair. "The announcement should happen at the anniversary gala," she said. "The board will support it, the Prescott family will support it, and the press will understand what it means." Vincent remained at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. "No one has asked what it means to Natalie." Natalie offered a calm smile. "I understand the arrangement." "That was not my question." Charles leaned forward. "Personal hesitation cannot be allowed to threaten a deal of this size." Vincent looked at him. "Do not confuse hesitation with consent." Outside the conference room, Emily waited with revised schedules and briefing notes. Through the glass, she could see the measured gestures, the careful smiles, and the way Natalie's name appeared beside Vincent's on the presentation screen. She did not need to hear every word to understand. When the meeting ended, Charles handed her a folder. "The gala will include a personal announcement," he said. "You will coordinate the speech, press release, security, and jewelry delivery." Emily opened the folder. Inside was a profile of Natalie, preferred photographers, seating plans, and a recommendation from a private jeweler on Michigan Avenue. Her hands remained steady. "Has Mr. Moretti approved this?" "He understands what is required." That answer told her everything. Over the next several days, Emily became responsible for constructing the evening everyone else believed would unite Vincent and Natalie. She selected white roses because Margaret considered them timeless. She scheduled a private fitting for Natalie. She reviewed the engagement announcement until every sentence sounded warm enough to hide the business language beneath it. At the jeweler, Emily examined 3 rings under bright glass lights and chose the one that matched Natalie's public style, elegant, expensive, and impossible to overlook. The sales associate smiled while placing it inside a velvet box. "He must trust you," she said. Emily closed the lid. "He trusts me to finish what needs to be done." Each task required the same professionalism she brought to every crisis. But this time the work followed her home. At night, she found herself staring at the draft speech on her laptop, reading sentences about partnership, loyalty, and a shared future written for a man who had never spoken those words to her. Sophie noticed the change first. Emily stopped drinking coffee at Vincent's desk during late meetings. She no longer stayed after the final appointment unless required. When Vincent asked whether she would accompany him to New York for the Prescott negotiations, she said another assistant could manage the trip. "You always handle New York," he said. "Not this time." "Why?" Emily closed the travel folder. "Because Natalie should become familiar with that part of your life." The answer was reasonable. It also placed a distance between them that Vincent could feel but could not yet name. Later that evening, he found the velvet ring box locked inside Emily's desk drawer beside the speech she had written for him. For the first time, the future everyone had prepared did not feel like a solution. It felt like a room closing around him, and Emily was already searching for the door. Emily's distance began with small changes Vincent could not dismiss once he noticed them. She no longer remained in his office while he reviewed late reports. She stopped bringing the second cup of coffee she used to leave beside his hand without asking. When his meetings ran past dinner, she arranged food for the room and went home before it arrived. Every choice was professional, reasonable, and impossible to challenge. That made the silence between them more unsettling. Vincent had spent years believing orders simply followed him. Now he began to see that much of the order had belonged to Emily. She remembered which investors needed direct answers and which needed time. She knew when Margaret's sharpness hid concern and when Charles's confidence hid pressure. She could look at Vincent once across a crowded room and understand whether he wanted the meeting extended, ended, or redirected. No one else noticed those details because no one else had learned him so carefully. One evening, Daniel Brooks entered Vincent's office and found him staring at an untouched dinner tray Emily had arranged before leaving. "You have been reading the same page for 20 minutes, Daniel said. Vincent closed the report. "Emily has become distant." Daniel took the chair across from him. "She is preparing your engagement. That is her assignment." "That is the problem." Vincent's eyes narrowed. Daniel had served the Moretti family long enough to speak honestly when everyone else preferred caution. "You are not worried about losing a secretary," he continued. "You are worried about losing the only person in this building who has never wanted your name, your money, or your influence." Vincent looked toward the empty desk outside his office. "She has never asked me for anything." Exactly. The following morning, Vincent found Emily in the conference room reviewing the gala seating plan. Natalie's name appeared beside his at the center table. Emily's name was listed near the service entrance with the executive staff. "Move your seat," he said. Emily looked up. "Why?" "You should be closer to the stage. I need access to the press room and the service corridor. Another assistant can manage that." She returned her attention to the chart. "I prefer to handle it myself." Vincent watched her move his name beside Natalie's without hesitation. "You have stopped coming to New York. You leave before dinner. You no longer tell me when I am making a mistake unless the mistake affects the company." Emily placed the pen down carefully. "Those are professional boundaries. We did not need them before. Perhaps we should have." The answer landed more heavily than she intended. Vincent moved closer to the table, but his voice remained controlled. "Did I do something?" Emily almost laughed at the simplicity of the question. He had not betrayed her. He had made no promise. He had simply allowed everyone around him to build a future that made her place in his life painfully clear. "No," she said. "You are doing exactly what everyone expects." Vincent studied her face. "And what do you expect?" Emily looked at the two names printed side by side on the seating chart. "Nothing." That word disturbed him more than anger would have. Before he could ask again, Charles entered with Margaret and began discussing the announcement schedule. Emily gathered her papers and stepped away from the table. Vincent watched her leave, finally understanding that she was not creating distance to punish him. She was learning how to live without him. Later that afternoon, Daniel placed a sealed envelope on Vincent's desk. "This came through Human Resources," he said. Vincent opened it and found a copy of Emily's request for employment verification. The destination was a law firm in Boston. For the first time, The possibility of her leaving stopped being an uncomfortable thought and became a date approaching on the calendar. Emily accepted the Boston offer on a Thursday afternoon without telling Vincent. The firm specialized in corporate compliance and offered a path back toward the legal career she had once abandoned. It was not the most powerful position in the city, but it belonged to her. No family alliance had arranged it. No one expected her to remain invisible. She signed the acceptance letter, closed the email, and sat quietly for several seconds while the office moved around her. Relief came first. Grief followed. She had spent 6 years learning every rhythm of Vincent's life, and leaving felt less like changing jobs than removing herself from a place she had helped build. Sophie found her later in the records room, sorting files into labeled boxes. "You are really going," she said. Emily did not deny it. "My last day will be after the gala." Sophie looked toward the executive offices. "Does he know?" "Not yet." "Why not?" Emily placed another folder into the box. "Because if I tell him before the announcement, he will think I am reacting to Natalie. I need this decision to belong to me." That evening, Emily completed the final draft of Vincent's speech. The language spoke of duty, partnership, and a future strengthened by shared purpose. It was elegant, controlled, and empty of anything that sounded like him. She printed the pages, placed them inside the leather folder, and set the velvet ring box beside them on his desk. Then she added her resignation letter underneath. She had written it 3 times before finding words that sounded professional enough to hide what they cost. Natalie arrived as Emily was leaving. She wore a pale coat over an evening dress from her fitting, her expression composed and curious. Her eyes moved to the boxes near Emily's desk. "Are you transferring offices?" "I am leaving the company." Natalie paused. "Before the announcement?" "After the gala." Something almost sympathetic crossed Natalie's face, but it disappeared beneath certainty. "That is probably wise." Emily reached for her coat. "Why?" Natalie glanced through the glass toward Vincent's empty office. "Because men like him do not choose women like us for the same reasons. They choose what strengthens their world. Women like us. Women who understand arrangements." Emily studied her. Natalie was not cruel. She had simply accepted a life where emotion was another asset to manage. "You believe he will choose you because the arrangement is useful," Emily said. "That is how his world works." Emily picked up her bag. "Then perhaps leaving is the first useful thing I have done for myself." Natalie's expression sharpened. "Walking away before he chooses someone else protects your pride." Emily stopped near the elevator. "No. Walking away is the first time I have chosen my own future." The doors opened, and Emily stepped inside before Natalie could answer. Hours later, Vincent returned from a private dinner with the Prescott family and found the office dark. Emily's desk had been cleared of personal items. The small photograph of her mother and brother was gone. So was the blue ceramic mug Sophie had given her. Only the gala schedule remained, perfectly organized beside the leather folder. Vincent opened it and found the speech first. He read 2 pages before recognizing how completely the words described a life others had designed for him. Then the velvet box caught his attention. He opened it, saw the ring, and felt no anticipation, only distance. Beneath the box lay Emily's resignation. Her final day was listed as the morning after the gala. At the bottom, she had written 1 sentence by hand. "I hope the life they chose for you makes you happy." Vincent read it twice. Daniel appeared in the doorway, saying nothing. Vincent folded the letter carefully. "How long have you known?" "Since Human Resources received the verification request." "And you said nothing." "I believed you already understood why she was leaving." Vincent looked toward Emily's empty desk. For the first time, every achievement waiting at the gala felt smaller than the one loss he had refused to name. The ballroom at the Blackstone Hotel was already filled when Vincent arrived, yet he felt as though every detail had been arranged inside someone else's life. White roses framed the stage. 2 chairs waited beneath the Moretti Holdings crest. Natalie stood near the front in an ivory gown, speaking with Margaret while photographers tested their lights. Charles moved through the room with the satisfaction of a man who believed the future had finally become predictable. Emily stood near the side curtain with her tablet and final schedule, dressed in a simple navy evening suit that made her almost invisible beside the gowns and tailored tuxedos around her. She had completed every task. The press release was ready. The jeweler had delivered the ring. The speech waited inside the leather folder, now resting in Vincent's hand. Only her resignation had not been part of their plan. Vincent watched her direct a server toward the correct table and answer a question from the press coordinator. She did not look at him. The distance was no longer subtle. It had become a decision. Daniel approached quietly. The host will call you in 3 minutes. Vincent glanced at the 2 chairs on the stage. Who approved those? Charles and Margaret. Remove one. Daniel studied him. Which one? Vincent did not answer. Across the ballroom, Emily checked the time and moved closer to the service corridor. She intended to leave as soon as Vincent finished the announcement. Her final responsibility was to make certain his chosen future began without disorder. The orchestra softened, and the host stepped to the microphone. Applause spread through the room as Vincent walked toward the stage. Charles met him near the steps. Everything is in place, he said. Do not improvise. Vincent looked at him. You mistake preparation for permission. Charles's smile tightened. Margaret joined them before he could respond. Whatever hesitation you feel, control it until the cameras are gone. Vincent opened the leather folder. The speech Emily had written described loyalty, stability, and a partnership designed to strengthen both families. Beneath the final page, her handwritten sentence remained folded inside his pocket. I hope the life they chose for you makes you happy. The host welcomed the guests and spoke about legacy. Natalie took her place beneath the warm stage lights. Emily remained near the curtain, already holding her coat over one arm. Vincent saw it. He also saw the small employee identification card resting on top of her tablet, ready to be returned before she left. The realization struck with quiet clarity. If he followed the prepared speech, Emily would walk out before the applause ended, and every person in the ballroom would call the evening a success. The host turned toward him. Mr. Moretti, the board understands that tonight marks an important personal and professional announcement. Who will stand beside you in the next chapter? Natalie smiled. Charles folded his hands. Margaret watched without blinking. Vincent looked down at the speech, then closed the folder. Before I answer, he said, there is something everyone in this room should understand. Charles stepped toward the stage, but Daniel quietly blocked his path without touching him. Vincent continued. For weeks, people have selected the words I should say, the agreement I should protect, and the woman I should choose. The room became still. Natalie's expression changed, not with surprise, but recognition. Perhaps she had always known the arrangement could not create what it claimed to represent. Vincent looked toward Emily. She had stopped near the exit. I allowed that because obligation was easier than honesty, he said. Emily's fingers tightened around her coat. Charles called from below the stage. Vincent, this is neither the time nor the place. Vincent removed the resignation letter from his pocket. It became the place when the only person who never asked me for anything decided she had to leave in order to choose herself. Every face turned toward Emily. She stood frozen beneath the softer light near the doorway, exposed in a way she had never wanted. Vincent stepped away from the prepared chairs. He did not call her forward. He did not command her to stay. He simply held up the folded letter and said, Emily Carter, you are free to leave. But you should know that I will not read the life they wrote for me. For several seconds, the ballroom remained so quiet that the faint clink of glassware from the service corridor sounded unusually loud. Emily stood near the exit with her coat over one arm and her employee identification card resting on top of her tablet. Every person in the room had turned toward her, but Vincent did not ask her to move. He stayed on the stage, holding her resignation letter as though it were the first honest document placed in his hands all evening. Charles recovered first. This announcement concerns the future of Moretti Holdings, he said. It cannot be redirected by a private employment matter. Vincent looked at him. That is exactly what has been wrong with this evening. Everyone here has treated private lives as company property. Margaret stepped forward, her expression controlled but strained. The Prescott Agreement protects thousands of employees and years of planning. You do not abandon that responsibility because one woman decided to leave. Natalie remained beneath the stage lights, but she no longer looked surprised. She looked tired. Let him finish, she said. Charles turned toward her. Natalie, this affects your family as well. I know, she replied. That is why I would rather hear the truth before someone places a ring on my hand for the sake of a press release. The room shifted again. Vincent stepped down from the stage, leaving the velvet box unopened beside the prepared speech. He walked toward Emily but stopped several feet away, careful not to turn his choice into another demand. They expected me to choose Natalie because the agreement was useful, he said. They expected you to organize it because you always make difficult things appear effortless. Emily met his eyes. I was doing my job. You were doing more than that. Charles moved closer. Vincent, if you reject this alliance tonight, the Prescott family can withdraw from the expansion agreement by morning. Then they should, Vincent said. Margaret's face hardened. You would risk everything for a secretary? Vincent did not look away from Emily. No, I am refusing to risk the rest of my life for an arrangement no one involved truly wants. He turned toward Natalie. You deserve to be asked, not assigned. Natalie gave a small nod. So did you. Then Vincent faced the room. There will be no engagement announcement tonight. The business agreement will be reviewed without personal conditions attached to it. If it cannot survive that review, then it was never a partnership worth keeping. Charles's confidence finally broke. And what exactly are you announcing instead? Vincent looked toward Emily. Nothing she has not agreed to. He unfolded the resignation letter and held it out to her. Emily took it slowly. You have every right to leave, he said. I will not interfere with Boston, your position, or the life you are building. Her fingers tightened around the paper. Then why say any of this here? Because they made your silence part of their plan, and I made the mistake of accepting it. He paused. You should not have to leave believing I never saw you. Emily's expression softened for only a moment. Seeing me now does not erase 6 years of letting me stand behind you. I know. And choosing me in front of this room does not prove you would choose me when the cameras are gone. I know that too. The honesty in his answer unsettled her more than any grand declaration could have. Vincent took one step back, giving her space. The woman I would choose is you, he said. But that does not make you mine, and it does not make your answer due tonight. No applause followed. No music returned. Emily looked around at the board, the photographers, the 2 empty chairs, and the future everyone had arranged without asking either person expected to live it. Then she looked back at Vincent. I am still leaving, she said. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. Then leave because you chose your future, not because you believed I had already chosen someone else. Emily placed the resignation letter against her tablet. That is the only reason I can leave. She turned toward the doors. Vincent did not stop her. He stood beneath the chandeliers while she walked out freely, and for the first time in his life, choosing someone meant accepting that she could still choose to go. Emily left Chicago the following morning with 2 suitcases, a folder of legal documents, and no promise that she would return. Vincent did not send a car to the airport. He did not call the Boston firm, change the terms of her contract, or ask Daniel to persuade her to reconsider. For a man accustomed to solving problems through influence, restraint became the most difficult decision he had ever made. He sent only one message after her plane landed. I meant what I said. Your future belongs to you. Emily read it in the back seat of a taxi moving through Boston rain. She did not answer immediately. She needed to know whether his words could survive distance, silence, and the absence of an audience. Her new position placed her inside a corporate compliance team, where her judgment appeared on reports carrying her own name. She completed the professional requirements needed to return to legal work, attended evening courses, and built a routine that did not depend on Vincent's calendar. For the first time in years, her mornings belonged to her. Vincent returned to Moretti Holdings and dismantled the arrangement that had been designed around him. The Prescott expansion agreement was separated from every personal expectation and sent through an independent review. Natalie supported the decision publicly, making it clear that neither family would use marriage as a condition of business. Charles opposed the change and warned that investors would see uncertainty. Vincent answered that an agreement requiring 2 people to surrender their freedom was not stability. It was control disguised as tradition. Margaret resisted longer. She reminded him of duty, legacy, and the consequences of disappointing powerful families. Vincent listened without anger. You taught me to protect the family name, he told her. Emily taught me that a name is not worth protecting if it requires someone else to disappear. He did not speak about Emily in interviews. He did not turn the ballroom confession into publicity. When reporters asked why the engagement had been canceled, Moretti Holdings released a brief statement explaining that the business partnership would proceed only on independent terms. Emily noticed. Weeks passed. Vincent contacted her rarely, and never to ask when she was coming back. He sent congratulations when she completed her first compliance review. He forwarded a foundation policy and asked for her professional opinion without expecting free work. When she sent an invoice, he paid it without comment. The gesture made her smile because it proved he understood something important. Respect was not admiration spoken in public. It was the boundary honored when no one was watching. 3 months after the gala, Vincent invited Emily to serve as independent legal counsel for the Moretti Foundation. The offer came through formal channels, with clear authority, competitive compensation, and a clause protecting her from executive interference. She reviewed every page. Near the end, she found a handwritten note attached separately. "This position is yours whether your answer to me is ever yes." Emily sat alone in her Boston office as evening light faded across the windows. For the first time, Vincent's choice did not feel like a demand hidden inside devotion. He had accepted the possibility that she might build a life without him and had changed anyway. She called him that night. He answered after the first ring, but said nothing beyond her name. "I received the offer," she said. "You do not owe me an answer tonight." "I know." A quiet pause settled between them. "I will accept the position," Emily continued, "under the written terms. Every one of them. And I will not return as your secretary. I would not ask you to." Emily looked at the city outside her window. "This does not mean the ballroom decided anything for us." "No," Vincent said. "It means nothing changes unless you choose it." She closed the contract. "Then let me come back and see who you are when no one is applauding." Vincent exhaled slowly, the first sign that her words had reached beneath his control. "That is all I am asking." Emily ended the call knowing she had not given him a romantic conclusion. She had offered him something more difficult, the opportunity to prove that his choice could become a life built on equality rather than possession. Emily returned to Chicago on a clear Monday morning carrying one suitcase, a leather portfolio, and a contract bearing her own title. She did not enter Moretti Holdings through the executive entrance. She walked through the main lobby with the other professionals, checked in under her own name, and accepted a visitor badge instead of the employee identification card she had once worn every day. By noon, she was seated at the head of a conference table reviewing the Moretti Foundation's new governance policy. Vincent sat several chairs away. He did not interrupt her, answer for her, or use familiarity to weaken her authority. When Charles questioned one of her recommendations, Emily explained the legal risk in measured detail and waited until the room accepted the conclusion on its merits. Vincent remained silent until the discussion ended. Then he said, "Council's recommendation stands." It was not protection. It was recognition. Over the following weeks, Emily watched for the man behind the ballroom declaration. She saw him give department leaders room to disagree. She saw him separate family pressure from company policy. He listened more often, spoke less quickly, and stopped treating control as proof of strength. Their conversations remained careful. Sometimes they discussed contracts over coffee. Sometimes they walked along the Chicago River after meetings, speaking about ordinary things that had never fit inside their old roles. Vincent never asked when she would forgive him. Emily never promised that she would. Trust returned through repetition, not spectacle. 3 months later, the Moretti Foundation held its annual benefit in the same ballroom where Emily had once stood near the service corridor preparing to disappear. The white roses were gone. In their place were simple arrangements of blue hydrangeas and greenery. There were no prepared chairs beneath the company crest and no private announcement hidden inside a business event. Vincent arrived alone and greeted donors near the stage. Whispers followed him through the room. Some believed Emily had returned only as legal counsel. Others assumed the distance between them meant the confession had ended the night it began. Margaret approached Emily near the entrance. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Margaret looked at the portfolio in Emily's hand and said, "You came back on your own terms." "Yes." The older woman gave a small nod. "That was the only way you should have returned." When the program began, Emily remained near the back, not because anyone had placed her there, but because she was still speaking with a group of nonprofit directors. Vincent saw her across the room. He did not call her forward. He did not cross the ballroom to claim the moment. He simply waited. When the conversation ended, Emily closed her portfolio and looked toward him. The room seemed to hold its breath as she began walking. She passed the service corridor where she had once held her coat and resignation letter. She passed Charles, who lowered his eyes. She passed Natalie, attending as a representative of the Prescott Charitable Trust, who offered her a warm, knowing smile. Then Emily reached Vincent and stopped beside him. Not behind him, not beneath his name, beside him. A reporter nearby asked the question everyone had been too polite to say aloud. Mr. Moretti, does this mean you finally chose Emily Carter? Vincent looked at Emily before answering. She understood the question, the room, and the old belief hidden inside both. He chose me that night, she said calmly. But that was never enough. The reporter waited. Emily turned toward Vincent, whose expression held none of the certainty he once wore like armor. Today I am here because I chose him too. Vincent offered his hand, but he did not take hers until she placed her hand in his. The applause began softly, then moved through the ballroom, but neither of them looked toward the cameras. They had already learned that a public choice could begin a story, but only humility could sustain one. And that day, love stopped being a decision made by power and became a choice made by equals.